The house had never been this quiet before. Miriam stood in the kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The ticking clock above the fridge sounded louder than it ever had in the 12 years she had lived there. Every tick echoed through the room like a reminder that time was moving forward, whether she was ready or not. Daniel used to complain about that clock. He said it sounded like a hammer tapping inside his skull every morning. For years, she had laughed at him and promised to replace it. She never did. Now, she found herself staring at it, almost grateful for the noise. Without it, the silence would swallow her whole. She heard the front door open. Her chest tightened automatically. For a split second, her heart leaped in relief, expecting to hear Daniel's familiar voice call out, "Mimi, I'm home." But it wasn't him. It was just the wind pushing the loose door she had forgotten to lock. Miriam exhaled slowly, pressing her palm against the kitchen counter to steady herself. She hated how her body still reacted as if he might return. She hated how hope lingered like a stubborn bruise. 12 years. 12 years of shared meals, shared bills, shared jokes, and shared arguments. 12 years of learning the rhythm of someone else's breathing beside her every night. And now, nothing. The decision, Hadan, Tebe in Sudan. If anything, it had taken years. Their relationship had begun with laughter that filled entire rooms. They met in university, two strangers who bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap street food. Daniel was loud, confident, and endlessly optimistic. Miriam was quiet, observant, and careful with her emotions. He had once told her she made him feel calm. She had once told him he made her feel alive. Somewhere along the way, those feelings changed. Not disappeared, just changed. The fights began small. Forgotten errands, Maisheth calls, tiny disappointments that stacked quietly like books on a shelf until one day the shelf collapsed under the weight. Daniel worked longer hours. Miriam spoke less and less. They stopped asking each other how their days were. They stopped holding hands during movies. They stopped noticing when the other person cried. But they stayed. Because leaving felt impossible. Because 12 years is a long time to walk away from. Because the idea of starting over felt more terrifying than being unhappy together. Miriam walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the familiar space. The couch still had the faint dip on Daniel's side. His old hoodie still hung over the armrest where he had left it 3 weeks ago. She picked it up carefully, pressing it to her face. It still smelled like him. Her chest tightened, and tears blurred her vision. People thought breakups were explosions. Loud arguments. Doors slamming. Words thrown like knives. But this had been quieter. It ended with Daniel sitting across from her at the dining table, his hands folded tightly together as if he were holding himself in place. "I think we're staying because we're scared," he had said softly. Miriam remembered how her throat burned when she tried to speak. "I'm scared too," she whispered. He nodded, tears sitting in his eyes but refusing to fall. "We don't make each other happy anymore." The words hung between them like a fragile glass ornament, waiting to shatter. She wanted to argue. She wanted to beg. She wanted to remind him of their vacations, their inside jokes, their promises. But she also knew he was telling the truth. They had become roommates who shared memories instead of lovers who shared dreams. And somehow, that hurt even more. Miriam sank onto the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. The fear wasn't just about losing Daniel. It was about losing the life she had built around him. Who was she without the routines they created together? Who would she call when she found a funny video? Who would sit beside her during thunderstorms when she couldn't sleep? The thought of eating dinner alone made her stomach twist. The thought of waking up to an empty bed felt unbearable. For 12 years, loneliness had been something that happened to other people. Now it sat beside her like an unwanted guest. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Her heart skipped. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. For a moment, she just stared at the screen, unsure whether answering would heal her or break her all over again. Finally, she swiped. "Hello." There was a pause. Then his voice, soft and familiar. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. The sound of him felt like stepping into warm sunlight after months of rain. "I'm fine," she lied. He exhaled, and she could almost picture him rubbing the back of his neck, the way he always did when he was nervous. "I miss you," he said quietly. Tears slid down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I miss you too." Silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they both wanted to say but couldn't. "Do you think we made the right decision?" she finally asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. "I think," he began slowly, "we made the honest decision." Honest. The word cut deeper than she expected. After the call ended, Miriam sat there for a long time, staring at the dark screen of her phone. She realized something then. She wasn't just mourning Daniel. She was mourning the version of herself that existed when she was with him. The woman who felt secure, certain, and loved in ways that had slowly faded. The loneliness wasn't just about being alone in the house. It was about facing herself without the distraction of a relationship. That terrified her. Later that night, she walked into the bedroom. The bed looked too large now, the empty half staring at her like a question she didn't know how to answer. She hesitated before lying down, instinctively staying on her usual side. She reached her hand across the mattress, expecting to feel warmth. There was none. The cold sheets made her chest ache. Tears slipped silently into her pillow as memories flooded her mind. The nights they stayed awake talking about their future. The mornings Daniel made terrible pancakes, but insisted they were gourmet. The way he used to hold her when she had nightmares. She missed him. But beneath the sadness, another realization began to form. She had been afraid of being alone for so long that she never asked herself if she could actually survive it. Or maybe grow from it. Days passed slowly. Miriam found herself learning small things she had forgotten about herself. She started cooking meals Daniel didn't like. She rearranged the living room furniture. She began reading again, something she had abandoned years ago. Each change felt strange, like wearing someone else's clothes. But with every passing day, the silence in the house felt less like an enemy and more like space. Space she could fill with pieces of herself she had ignored. She still missed him. So many mornings, the loneliness hit her so hard, she struggled to breathe. Some nights, she reached for her phone, tempted to ask him to come back. But she didn't. Because deep down, she knew they hadn't ended because they stopped loving each other. They ended because love alone wasn't enough to keep them from losing themselves. One evening, Miriam stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt peaceful. She realized she was still afraid of being alone. That Fioradinti disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in slowly. For the first time since Daniel left, she whispered out loud, "I'll be okay." The words felt fragile, uncertain, but they were true. And as the last light of the sun faded beyond the horizon, Miriam stood there in the silence, not as someone who had lost 12 years, but as someone who had finally found herself waiting on the other side of them.